We're getting close to the Shabbat Parashat Zachor. This upcoming Saturday we're going to have two Torah readings. The first one is Tetzaveh, and the second one a mitzvah to remember. It's from the book of Deuteronomy. The Torah tells us that we have to remember the ancient Amalek. The ancient Amalek, the rabbis tells us, it's the phenomena that reoccur throughout generation, from the time of the ancient time, the Jewish people wandering in the desert, when suddenly a nation of Amalek attacked them, through the Haftorah, which we're going to read in Mitzvah Shem, the story of King Agag, the descendants of Amalek, who tried to attack the Jewish people, and the King Saul lost his kingdom because he didn't eradicate the nation of Amalek. The rabbis tells us the story of Purim. This reading is always before Purim, which again will be this Saturday night and Sunday. Is the story of Haman, descendants of Amalek, descendants of Agag, who tried to attack us, and unfortunately to this very day we have the mitzvah to eradicate, to expunge, to erase the Amalek. The story of Amalek and the story of the Megillah is the story of our people. As Mark Twain said once, what is the secret of the Jewish survival? Hester, it's a story where God's name is hidden for the entire Megillah, yet God is there all the time. Even sometimes you don't see it straight in your eyes, but there is God there. And the divine providence never left us, even at the worst time throughout our exile. So it's a huge mitzvah to make an extra effort this upcoming Shabbat, this Saturday, to bring your entire family. Since the rabbis tell us it's a biblical mitzvah, it is our obligation to bring the elderly, to bring the little children, the wives, the women, everyone. Haman wants to get rid of all of us, Amalek wants to eradicate us, and therefore the mitzvah of Zachor, to remember, it's a biblical mitzvah that we hold to this very day. Please try to make an effort to come to synagogue this upcoming Saturday, not only for the Megillah reading in the evening, but also in the morning to hear the Torah portion of Zachor. The subject we're going to discuss today, it's the Tractate Shabbat, page 141. There are several points here. First, we're going to discuss the subject of Tiltul Minatzad, carry indirectly, moving indirectly. We're going also in Mitzvah Shem to discuss a specific melachot, such as the melacha of selecting borer and other melachot as well. Before we're going to the Mishnah, the top page of 141, let me share with you from the code, from the Mishnah Berurah, from the code of Jewish law, chapter Hilchot Shabbat, chapter Shin Yud Aleph 3:11, as follows: טלטול מן הצד לצורך דבר המותר, מותר. Indirect handling is permitted on Shabbat if it is done for the sake of an article that is permitted to be handled. So to use an example we used yesterday, consequently, if a radish buried in the ground and some of its leaves are exposed, then provided it has not rooted there, and one also had no intention to plant it, one may take it out of the ground, even though by taking it out he will certainly move earth from its place also. This is permitted even the radish has got larger because of the moisture in the ground. Then he said, and that's the subject we're going to discuss in the Mishnah, Hapeirot hatmunim. Here he speaks about the fruit. If fruit is buried in straw or stubble, that it's muktzeh, that it's set aside, one may insert a needle or a spindle inside it and take it out, although the stubble will be shaken off automatically. And then they comment, they said, if the fruit is buried in sand or earth, then we have a different approach to that. Now let's see what the Mishnah Brura said in Seif Lamed Gimel in the 33. He said, because it is designated, so he said as follow. First, let me again call the Magen Avraham. Handling muktzeh with one's body is even permitted for the sake of the article that is forbidden to be handled. Therefore, if there is a stubble which is dangerously earmarked for a fire or a bed, one may move it with its own body even though it is muktzeh. However, if one put a caution or bedding on it already on the day before Shabbat, he may move the stubble with his hand, because then it was designated already on the day before Shabbat for being laid on. Which means as long as it's designated in advance, he holds that it's fine. So the Mishnah Brura said, this means that even if one did not explicitly have in mind to lie on the stubble, it is nevertheless regarded as if he had it in mind because of this action. However, if one did have it in mind explicitly to avail for the stubble not to be classed as a muktzeh, as a set aside, even if he did not put a caution or bedding on it, as the Ramah said, it's okay. Now, why I gave you this introduction? Because now listen carefully to the Mishnah and see what's involved. The Mishnah said as follows. We are 4 lines from the top of the page 141. Hakash she'al gabei hamita. Straw that on the top of a bed. Again, remember the ancient time, but we can derive soon, you see, halachot from that point. If a person wishes to lie on it, so in general it's muktzeh, it's set aside, because usually the straw, they use it in those days for what? For heating. So they said, lo yena'ne'enu biyado. A person should not move it with his hand to smooth it, as the straw is set aside for kindling. Why? Because you don't move muktzeh in your hand. Lo legufo, lo lemekomo, not for the sake of any other purposes. So what he can do? He can move with his back, with his body, he can move the straw, and that way, while he is doing it, then it's called tiltul mehatzad. He's doing it as a side. Ele mena'neo begufo. Rather, he move it with his body. Since moving straw in one's body is not usual manner, so therefore it's permitted. It's not considering a tiltul. That's what Rashi said. Ve'im haya ma'achal be'ema, if it was designated for the animal consumption, which means he did it before Shabbat, so it's no longer muktzeh because it's omed la'achila, it's for the sake of eating. Or shaya alav kar o sadin, or if it was in advance a pillow or sheet was on it, which will clearly indicate that this straw was placed on the bed, so one can sleep it. That's exactly what the Mishnah Brura said. Mena'neo beyado. So one may move it even with his hand. Why? Because it's considered kli shemelachto leheter, because that's something that we use for the something that is permitted, and that's exactly what we read from the Magen Avraham. Now, the second part of the Mishnah, in those days, how they do a laundry. It was very different. They use a special, it's called machbesh, a press, but it was an old press that they used to put do these two platot, these two large press, and they used to do it letaken beged, to make the cloth straight. So they said machbesh ba'alei batim, a press which belonged to homeowner, which means it's not for the business, it's not in a dry cleaning business, it's just use it for his personal need. Matirin, so one may loosen it on Shabbat. The press is used to dry and press clothing after laundry. So one loosen it to remove clothing from earth. However, aval lo kovshin, one may not press clothing on Shabbat because it's either soter or boneh. Soter is like demolishing. Boneh is like a building. So in general, it's something that you do it during the secular week. You don't do it on Shabbat. So therefore, it said v'shel kovsin. If you use it to the for the laundry business, especially in those days, lo yigabo. You're not allowed to even touch it because that's definitely muktzeh. And since if you do that, it's basically melechet soter. It's like the same subcategory of demolishing. Now, the Rambam said in Hilchot Shabbat that it's called muktzeh mechamat chisaron kitz, that is set aside because this is something that involved with a business, and therefore you should not touch it because it's involved of denigrating the value if you start moving it and touching it, because it's designated for the business. People use it as for the business deed. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, אם היה מותר מערב Shabbat, Rabbi Yehuda hold, if the launderer is loosened somewhat before Shabbat, which means in Shabbat Eve, as so the Meiri said that it means that it wasn't tight very strongly, it was like loosened. Matir et kulo v'shomto. So one may loosen it completely on Shabbat and remove the garment. So here, soon we're going to read the halacha that not everyone agreed, Aruch HaShulchan disagree with that, etc. But again, the Rambam hold that the issue here is a muktzeh mechamat chisaron kis, that it's a set aside because it's involved with the business. So again, it was a very large pillar that you take these two and you loosen the others and you move out the garments, the clothing. It's like a very strong press machine, but it wasn't electricity. They use hands to make it. Now the GEMARA, Amar of Nachman, Hai Pulga. You remember we talked about the radish. Now we see exactly what's the Shulchan Aruch derived this halachot. He said here we talk about radish. So he said the radish which was buried on earth, if it was buried how milamala lemata, which means from the top to the bottom, which means again before Shabbat was talush. He planted in the ground. So the minute you plant the radish, you don't have an issue of shvit, you don't have an issue of chilayim, mixture. Why? Because the goal is called lishamer, which means to observe it, not to lo lizroa, not to plant it. That's the goal. So therefore, milamata lemala asir. So it's a huge difference how a person put this radish in the ground. If it's a very large on the top, so even you pull it out, as we read from the code, and there's some soil coming out with that, it's not the issue on Shabbat. However, if it's in an opposite way, which means when you move the top part, which means the bottom of the radish is up and the main point is down, so when you're pulling out, you are moving a large amount of soil, and therefore it's called muktzeh, it's set aside. And since we said tiltul mehatzad shmei tiltul, if you're moving it even as in a side point, it's considering tiltul, so it's a psik reishe, and you cannot do it. So again, you have to remember how we read it from the code, how you move it out. Amar Ravada Baraba, Amrei Beirav, they said in the house of study of Rav, Tanina de lo Rav Nachman. We learn unlike the way that Rav Nachman teaches, which is Hakash al gabe amita lo inanenu biyado. He said that the straw that on the top of the bed, one may not move it with his hand, aval menaneo begufo, but he may move it with his body. Remember what we said, that you need to use it for bed, so you can use your body to do it, but not. However, it's for if it's for the animal food, animal consumption, or that's exactly what we read in the Mishna. Shma mina, so what do we derive from that? Tiltul min hatzad, lo shmei tiltul. So they said that it means that if you're moving something from atypical manner, which means not in the way that it usually does, so it's a Shma mina. So when we repeat twice Shma mina, that's the final conclusion. And he said that we learn, unlike Rav Nachman, that moving an article in atypical manner is not considering moving, and that's the conclusion. So now, since we're dealing with atypical shinui, so now the Gemara dealing with melechet tochen, with melacha of grinding. When we do it with the shinui, which means you move it either by your, the Tosfot said, you're moving it with your body, or in other manner that it's atypical. Amar Rav Yehuda hanepilpelei meidak chada bekata de sakina sharei tarte asir. Rav Yehuda said in the case that you're using peppers, how you use peppers, so if you make Israeli salad, so the Israeli use very small portions, right? But in general, in the case of this pepper, so what people does, crushing them. So he said, as long as you make it in a very small way with the knife, you mean you use the handle of the knife, it's permitted. But if you're doing it, cutting 2 times, it's forbidden. Why? Because it's appear like you're doing a prohibited labor. So, so there are, let's make it clear that there's 2 conditions, he said. Number 1, you need to use the handle of the knife. And the second one is that you have to do it in a single, each of them individually. Not everyone agree with that. Tosfot brought Shilto de Rav Achai Gaon, and Rabbeinu Chananel said that even in that way, you shouldn't do it, even if atypical matter on Shabbat. But most of the rabbis go along with that. The Shulchan Aruch, Or HaChaim Shin Kaf Aleph 321, said if you do it in atypical manner, you can do it. So again, you see that he hold that 2 together. Not everyone agree. Rava said, wait. Since he altered the manner which is performed the activities, even crushing many on a time is also permitted. So, but the Mishnah Berurah emphasized here in Shin Kaf Aleph that it has to be for the purpose of that Shabbat, which means you cannot make it for the following day or for the future plans. You have to use it for right away for that purpose. You have to remember all the time when we allow something like that in a condition of, let's say, festival, etc., it means you need it for the meal that you're about to eat. Amar Rav Yehuda, man desache b'maya. Whoever now is dealing with one who bathed with the water. So he said, if it's a place like Carmelit, which is you go to a river, you go to we are in a city of boats, right? So you have the bay. So if someone is using that place to wash himself, so since that place is not considering a Reshut HaYachid, a private domain, and he is about to come out of the water, linagiv nafshe bereisha vehadar lislik. He should dry first himself immediately upon coming out of the water, and then he should ascend to the coast. Why? Dilma telatuy 400 bekarmelit. So we say that we're not allowed to carry 4 cubits in a Carmelit. So since the water is considering Carmelit, which is not a private or public domain, so therefore he should make sure that he's dry, so he's not carrying that water. The Mishnah Berurah said that that the best way is that to stand there to make sure that you are fully dry, and then go. But they said that's not apply if it's a sudden storm or sudden rain. That's not what we meant. So now they ask a question, if we're concerned about carrying water, they should be kikirnachet nami. When you go also to the water, when you descend in the water. Why? So they said it's also go force people to go 4 cubits in the river, and it's also prohibited. So GEMARA said, "Kocho bekarmelit lo gazru." No, the movement or result of force in Carmel, they said just not issue a decree. Why? Because it's not directly propel the water, but the water moves only as an extension of his motion. And since the river is a Carmelite, and the prohibition to carry is there, it's only a rabbinic law, so it's not an issue. אמר אביי, ויתם הרב יהודה, תיצ'ה על גבי רגלו, מונחו בקרקע ואין מונחו בכותל. Now we're going to several halachot. Says if someone have a mud in his foot, so those of you who have a chance to be in a desert, like Gil in a desert storm or all kind of desert situation, many times you walk in the mud. So the issue is, if you have mud, you want to wipe it. So they said how you should do it. So he said you should do it on the ground on Shabbat, but you don't put it on the wall, which means you see a wall, you try to put the mud there. Why you don't use it wall? It says mishum demechze keboneh. Because when you do it, it's appear. It's like a building or a field laborer. So he said, what does that mean? That people who are not educated, they see, and they're thinking that you are fixing some walls by putting it there. So they said, well, wait, habinyan chaklau. This is the, it's like a field laborer. It's like when you have something in the field, in agriculture or a field, so it's not considering a real binyan, a real building. So he said, so what's the problem? It's the opposite. He says, no, you can wipe it in the wall, but not wipe in the ground, because again, it's one come to level holes in the ground. So if you remember, we said in those days, it wasn't flooring that we call today. So it was a hole in the ground, and many times they need to make it in a level. So that's the opposite way. And usually the mud is coming out when you have a little hole in the ground. So therefore, the Ramban said that the issue is that people think that he does it on purpose to fill up the hole. Itmar, Mar Breder Ravina Amar Echad Ze Vechad Ze Asur. He holds that both ways is forbidden. Rav Papa Amar Echad Ze Vechad Ze Mutar. Rav Papa said both ways allow. You remember several days ago we said on the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, then until the end of the days, you see that it's a lot of disputations, and that's one of the reasons we need Eliyahu to reconcile all of that, because you see here a strong opinion. One said that regardless how you do it, in the wall or in the ground, it's permitted, and one said regardless is forbidden. So what's the reason? So the Tosfot said here, and the Ramban and the Rashba said that because he's so busy to get rid of that mud, so he will be so preoccupied with that, he forget that today is Shabbat, and he fill up the hole in the ground, which is prohibited. So one is a strong opinion that it's prohibited, one is a strong opinion that it's permitted. So if you go by Mar Breder Ravina, that say that either way it's forbidden, how he clean, wipe out his food. So they said mekan chelei bekora, he wipe it in the beam on the ground. Omar Rabba is another halacha. Lo leiti vini shapune de lechia dilma migandrei kesef achat chefetz vatela atuye. So one should not sit in the right of the entrance of the closed alleyway. Why? So this is a important lesson we Mitzvah will learn in the Tractate Talmud, which is someone sit in the closed alleyway, where is a side post, a place that make it as an entrance. Why? The issue is that perhaps an object will roll into a public domain, and while come together, there is no conspicuous demarcation between inside and outside the alleyway. So that's the issue of entering from the public domain to a private domain. Ve'amar Rabba, it's another halachot. So here we have many halachot. Lo litzaded inish kuva dilma atei lashvuye gumot. He said a person may not position a barrel on a dirt floor, lest he come to level holes in the ground, which again we explained that is a smoothing surface in the position of the barrel. ואמר רבא לו לידו קיניש הדורה בפימה דשישה דילמאתי לידי סחיטה. He said that a mortar, a person that's stuff a rag into the mouth of a jug on Shabbat, lest he come to violation of prohibition of squeezing liquid on the from the cloth. Amar Rav Kahana, that's by the way the isur of melaben. Amar Rav Kahana, teach al gibo mechascheso mibefnim v'mechascheso mibachutz. That's soon you see that it's a very practical halacha. He said that a mortar that is one garment on Shabbat, one may rub it off from the inside, but one may not rub it off from the outside, because it's comfortable to prohibition of labor of laundering. So you have sometimes something on your clothes. So from outside is different than you do it from inside, because inside it looks like you're doing some type of laundry. If you do it from outside, it's look like a laundry. Michze kemelaben. So this is a rabbinic prohibition. But the Mishnah Berurah said in Shin Bet that if you do it from inside, so it's by himself come out. So that's fine. Meitivei, teach al gabe min alo. If you have a mortar that is in one shoe, so megarero begav sakin, one may scrape it with the back of his knife. So again, what is the idea of back of his knife? Is atypical manner, which means that's not the way usually people do. So it's a reminder that today is Shabbat. Then he said, "V'sha'al bigdo megarero betziporen," that when it's on one cloth, may scrap it with a fingernail. Ubilvad shelo yichasches. The condition is that as long as it's not rubbed. So they said, my love shelo yichasches klal. So it means that as long as not rubbed at all. They said lo shelo yichasches mibachutz mibifnim. So it means that you should not rub it from outside but from inside. So mibifnim it's permissible. The whole idea that we allow to do it from inside is to get rid of some dirt, but to make it just look beautiful, it's not allowed. There are some say that the issue is derivative of tochen, which is like some type of grinding. That's the Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim Shin Bet. Anyway, not everyone agree with that idea. Amar Rabbi Abahu, Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Yanai, megarerin minal chadash אבל לא ישן. In Hebrew you call it bots, which means one may scrap mud off the new shoe on Shabbat, but not off on the old shoe. Why? So he said that that's called memachek, which means that you smoothed it by taking away all the hair. You smoothed it. So they said here, that's the reason the layer of the shoe will be removed, which constitutes a prohibition of labor of memachek, is like smoothing. We just turned the page 141b. Now we ask how you do that. Since you use a scrap, so he said, when you want to do it on the back of the knife. So back of the knife, it's clearly that's not the way people scrap a dirt or mud from the shoe. So when you do that, it's clear that you are not memachek, you're not smoothing anything, since it's not sharp, it's the back of the knife, and you don't take out the layer. So because otherwise, if you use the sharp part of the knife, it's really smoothing. It's memachek. Amar le'ahu Saba. It was, in our tradition, we respect tremendously the elderly. So here we talk about elderly person. Elderly can be someone who's an old age, but in the Talmudic language is also someone who's the oldest they get, the smartest they get, the more respect we give in our tradition. So he said, somebody tachmir kameha netane rabchia. He said, delete you teaching from before the statement taught by Rabbi Chia. It reminds me of my late grandmother. My late grandmother was a Rebbetzin, but she was a strong-hand Rebbetzin. So, you know, the women's section, it's a totally in different place. But she, when she turned her 90, and the mind was still sharp, when she didn't like something, she walked inside the midst of the men studies or eatings, and she lifted up her cane, and she was like giving a series of admonition to some people. So one time as a kid, I said to her, Grandma, you know, why are you doing that? I meant, what you're saying is right, but she said, look, I am in my 90s. What's the worst case scenario? They said, these elderly ladies said something, who cares? So I can say a lot of things that I couldn't say 50 years ago. Anyway, so he said, delete you teaching from before the statement taught by Rabbi Chia. And he said, אין מגררים, לא מנהל חדש, ולא מנהל ישן. He said, you should not do it even the back handle of the knife. Why? Because it's psikreisha, the Bet Yosef said, it's you shouldn't do it because otherwise it's you can enter domain of memachek, that like some type of erasing or smoothing. That's the way Mishnah Brura said in Shin Bet. But my teacher, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, in the book written by Rabbi Neuwirth, Shmirat Shabbat K'Hilchata, he said that if you do it slowly, like the Mishnah Brura said, it's okay. But not everyone is happy. There's some concern about some type of binyan or mashve gumot, some type of fixing holes, etc. So it's not the way that my teacher used to say. It's by doing it in a soft manner, if needed. Because let's face it, people don't like to walk on Shabbat. The shoes filled of mud. Okay. ולא יסוך את רגלו שמן, והוא בתוך המנהל או בתוך הסנדלן. So one may not smear oil on one foot while is the inside the shoe or inside the sandal, which means the oil absorbed by the leather of the shoe and strengthen it, which constitute a performance of the prohibition of tanning. אבל סך רגלו שמן הוא מניח בתוך המנהל. So here is the מלאכת מעבד. But they said, וסך כל גופו שמן הוא מתעגל על גבי כתלבליה ואינו חושש. Which means that one may smear oil on his foot in a typical manner and place it afterward in a shoe or a sandal, and he is not concerned that the oil will enhance the shoe leather. And he may likewise smear oil on his entire body and roll on a leather carpet, and he need not to be concerned of the me'abed, melechet me'abed. But אמר רב חיסדא לא שנו אלא לצחצחו, אבל לעבדו אסור. So Rav Chisda said it's only allowed to, in order to polish the carpet, but if he tan it, it's forbidden because it's considering me'abed. So the Gemara asks, le'abdo pshita. If you tan it, it's obvious that it's prohibited, that it's deoraita, it's biblical. So for example, if you need to, you see your shoes, you're about to go to a synagogue and you look at your shoe and you see that it needs to smear it to make it look good, that's forbidden. If you need to use some type of cream or something to make it, because there are several biblical precepts, biblical prohibitions. So they said that itmar achi itmar. If you stated, that's the following statement. אמר רב חיסדא לא שנו אלא שיעור לצחצחו, אבל שיעור לעבדו אסור. That if you do it to polish it, that's fine, but if you do it to tan it, it's prohibited, but because you have the idea of tanning the leather. Halacha, soon you see, we go by the Rabbi Shimon, that if it's a דבר שאינו מתכוון, you don't intend to, it's allowed, even from in both ways, but soon you see all the different opinion on how to do it properly. תנו רבנן, לא יוצא קטן במנעל גדול, אבל יוצא הוא בחלוק גדול. So here they said, if you have a small person, so let's say he wearing shoe number, let's say 8. Now he wearing a shoe of his big brother, and he's number 10. So they said, a small person may not go out in a too large shoe. Why? Because the idea is the shoe fell off, and you come to carry it in the public domain, which is prohibited, right? To carry. But he may go out with a large cloak. Why? Because if the cloak will not fit him, so we're not worried that people will take it off. Why? Because most of the people don't like to go naked in a public domain, right? Now, ולא תצא אישה במנעל מרופט. Women may not go out on Shabbat in a shoe that was torn on the top. ולא תחלוץ בו, והיא מחלצה חלצתה כשרה. Let's face it, women, when they see that it's torn and people look at her, what she do? She's going to take it off and carry it because it will be embarrassing for her. And therefore the chashash is that she's going to carry it in her hand. So therefore, if she perform a chalitza, which means she take it off, the chalitza is valid, which since ultimately it's considering a shoe. ואין יוצאים במנהל חדש, באיזה מנהל אמרו? במנהל של אישה. So again, that speaks about women shoe, that if it's a new, she's not, because women usually are very particular. We have in the shoe that they want to make sure that it's a fit properly. Men can wear a shoe that it's smaller or bigger. They need a shoe. Boom, they put the shoe. Doesn't matter. You know, typical men can have we're getting close to Purim. He can have red pants and green shirts, and he doesn't care. Women care for this. The shoe did not fit them properly. I have to confess, I never go with my daughters or my wife to any time when they need to buy a shoe in the store, because I tried once, twice, and I can't take it. It's too long and too much. They have to fit exactly the measurement, right? You're looking at me like I'm saying something, but right? Anyway, Tani bar kapara, לא שנו אלא שלא יצאה בו שעה אחת מבעוד יום, אבל יצא בו מערב שבת, מותר. The only touch that she may not go out wearing a new shoe on Shabbat if she did not yet go out wearing it any length of a time while it's still day. On the contrary, if she went out wearing on Shabbat Eve, at which point she will have ascertained that it fits her, so she's permitted to wearing it on Shabbat. So that's basically what Rashi said. But the Yerushalmi have a long discussion over that. Tan echad השומטין מינה לגבי אימוס ותן אידך אין שומטין. So here we said that in one may remove the shoe from the shoemaker's lass, the frame which the shoe is shaped, and another by the said the opposite. ותן אידך אין שומטין. So how come? So לא קשיא עד רבי אליעזר עד רבנן. One hold according to Rabbi Eliezer and according to Rabbanan. So the Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis dispute or what's exactly application of this halacha. Etnan. This is the Mishna in Tractate Kelim 26. Min al shal gabei imus. Shoe that will remain on the last. So Rabbi Eliezer metaher, which means Rabbi Eliezer said that it's not ra'ui lekabel tuma, it's not accept ritual impurity. The sages said that it's impure, which means that he is recipient to receiving state impurity. So the point is, if that shoe is considering a vessel, a kli, in advance, before they take it out of the last. So now we said, Anicha lerava. That's good according to Rabbi, what we studied earlier in 126, 123, 124. דבר שמלאכתו לאיסור ולצורך גופו ולצורך מקומו מותר. So something that you use it a function for a prohibited use. So whether for the purpose of utilizing the object himself to perform a permitted action or for its place, it's fine. So you can put this braita according to the Chachamim, the sages, that this min'al, this shoe is considering a independent vessel. אלא לביידה אמר רק לצורך גופו מותר, לצורך מקומו אסור. The Abaida told only you allow to utilizing the object itself to perform a permitted action. So it's permitted. But on the contrary, for the purpose of utilizing its place, לצורך גופו מותר, לצורך מקומו אסור, so its place is prohibited. So Michael Meimar, so how we learn it? How can a person metaltel in Shabbat carry it on Shabbat? So you have to say that this apply to a shoe placed loosely on the last. So the shoe can be removed without moving the last. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda אומר, אם היה רפוי מותר. Rabbi Yehuda said that if it was a loose, you can do it. Tama de rafui. The reason that is permitted it's only because it's loose. Halo rafui lo, but if it's not loose lo, no. הניחא לאביי דאמר כלי שמחתו לאיסור לצורך גופו מותר לצורך מקומו אסור שפיר. That will be easy by the one who said that if it's only for the purpose of itself, but not for the utilizing its place. So it's fine, but according to Rava that said that moving an object whose primary function is prohibitedly used, whether the purpose of utilizing object itself to perform a permitted action or for the purpose of utilizing its place, it's permitted. So even it's not loose, we also say that you're allowed to do it. So that's what he said, it's according to Rabbi Eliezer, which means that only it's muktzeh when it's a set aside, when it's a mehudak, when it's a very tight, but otherwise it's not. The Tanya Rabbi Omer Mishum Rabbi Eliezer im haya rafui mutar, which means according to Rabbi Eliezer, if it's loose, it's considering shem nal. It's if it's already loose, it's no longer require a last, but it's permitted to move it. Since it's a completed vessel, there's no longer need to last to shape it. Adran al-Achtolin, we may continue and come back to study this chapter 20, Tolim. Now we're about to start chapter 21. We're about to begin chapter 141. Since we learn a lot of halachot of muktzeh, of set aside, now we're dealing with different phases of muktzeh. The Meiri tells us that this is something that we are, the sages prohibited in several cases, but not necessarily for the reason of muktzeh itself, can be other reasons, such as noter adam et bno va'even beyado. A person allowed to carry his son on his hand on Shabbat, and even though there is a stone, which is what is a stone? Stone is it's a muktzeh, set aside. Which means, again, you have the child carry a stone in his hand, and the stone is a muktzeh, it's set aside, but the person can carry his son, let's say, you have your home, and you have the courtyard, and the son is out there in the courtyard. So you pulling out your son, whatever it is, he's playing with the bad kids, or doing something not right, and you carry him, but he starts crying, right, or whatever it is, and you carry while he is holding a muktzeh in his hand, he's holding a stone in his hand. So it's not considering like the father carrying the muktzeh, carry the stone. Okay? And now, v'chalkala v'aven betocha, or he can take a basket with the stone inside it on Shabbat, because again, it's not considering a muktzeh. And the GEMARA later explained why this basket is not considering basis ledavar asur, a base for something that is forbidden. Umetaltalin trumat me'ayim haTorah v'imachulin. Again, it's applied to a ritual impurity for teruma, for the contribution in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple. So you can use it as well as the same as the sacred, but also for the non-sacred produce. Rabbi Yehuda Omer af ma'alin et hameduma be'echad ve'mea. Rabbi Yehuda said one may even lift a measure of truma that it was nullified from a mixture of 100 measure of non-sacred produce and a measure of a truma, which means even that it's a mixture of the chulin with 100 measure of chulin, it's not considering metaken, it's not considering someone who's fixing on Shabbat, because a mixture of sacred and non-sacred, if it's not a kohen, he cannot eat it. So that's a combination of that. It's called meduma. It's like dema. The Torah said mele'atcha v'dim'acha lo te'acher. You should not use it. But if it's 100 times versus the truma, it's allowed. So here they said that the truma, it's anal. It's basically part of the chulin, and it's not considering metaken. Later the GEMARA elaborate on that. Amar Rava, הוציא תינוק חי וכיס תלוי בצווארו חייב בשום כיס. If one carry out a living baby in a public domain on Shabbat, and the baby had a purse that was hanging around his neck, he is liable for carrying out the purse. Why? Because basically it's a the GEMARA later explained that it's the issue of carrying it, and now you're going to juxtapose. How come with the stone you said yes, and now with the purse you said no? So GEMARA explained. But anyway, you need to bring a sing offering for that. Now, however, תינוק מת וכיס תלוי בצווארו פטור. If it's a God forbid, right? But if it happens that it's a dead baby, and they have a purse around his neck, which we assume just by reading this GEMARA that most probably it was in ancient time, that it was a very common, people die very young and the baby died in his cribs. Unfortunately, many times the advanced medicine was very different, so that's a possibility. So it says it's exempt. Now GEMARA elaborate on that. תינוק חי וכיס תלוי בצווארו חי משום כיס ולכוונה משום תינוק. So why you say that you put him as a sin offering just for carrying the person, not for the carrying the baby? That which means that if you take just the baby, is fully exempt, the Ritva said. So they said the idea is that's very important, that we say that if that baby is living being carry itself, so one who carry living being from one domain to another is not liable. Because anyway, as long as the baby can go by itself, let's say you have a child, usually like you spoil, he wants you to carry him, right? But that child is already, let's say, 3 years old, and he can walk by himself. He's just, too much walk, or is too spoiled, etc. So they said, "V'libatel kis legabei tinok." So now let the purse be negated relative to the baby, and should be exempt from carrying the purse as well. So milot nan, we learn, if you remember in 93b, את החי במיטה פתוח, על המיטה שהמיטה תפלה לו. We say that one can carry out a living person on a bed, exempt from carrying in a bed, because the bed is a secondary to the person. So we should say here the same in regard to purse, that relative to the baby. So they said מיטה לגבי חי מיבת ללי, כיס לגבי תינוק לא מיבת ללי. When it's a bed, is relative to a living being, so living being is negated. But the purse is relative to a baby, and the baby does not negate it, since it's independently significant. תינוק מת וכיס תלוי בצווארו פטור לחי משום תינוק. Now we said that the dead baby, so with the purse hanging around the baby neck, is exempt. So they said less liable for carrying out the baby. So they said, Rabbi Shimon סביר עלי, Rabbi hold v'sem Rabbi Shimon, ואמר מלאכה שנה צריך לגופה פטור עליה. Remember, we said it many times, Rabbi Shimon hold that if you do any type of labor that is not needed for its own sake, so one is exempt from performing it on Shabbat. So if you carry out a corpse, so it's not because you need it, it's the sake of the corpse, so you need to bury it, etc. So that's the story, not tenan. So while you're carrying the corpse, which is a dead baby, and meanwhile the baby carry a purse, but you don't do it for carrying the purse, you do it in order to bury the baby. So So it's a it's indirect, so he holds that it's fine. So, but we just said that a person take his son in his hand on Shabbat. So אמר דבניים בתינוק שיש לו געגועין אל אביו, like our sweetheart Avi, right? You leave him out, right? A baby is longing for his father. He is missing his father. He wants his daddy to carry him, right? He start screaming and crying, etc. So that's the the baby will be sick if the father will not carry in his hand. And since muktzeh it's a rabbinic, so they say just more lenient and allowed to carry it if it's not in hand. If so, if the Mishnah hold in a place that maybe sickness take place, we're just going to finish the sugya here on Kuf Mem Bet Amud Aleph in 142a. My area even afilu dinar nami. Why is necessarily said that the baby hold a stone? It's even he carry a dinar. It's like a coin. Lama amarav alushanu ela even. Aval dinar asu. So he said that it's only a stone, but if he carry this coin dinar, he said why is forbidden? So he said even in afla lo atavu la'atu, dinar in afla lo la'atu. If it's a stone fall on the ground, he crying, whatever, the father don't bother. But if it's money, so the father maybe go down and pick it up. So therefore, that's the reason why he said no. Nan kvatei דרבה מוציא כליו מקופלים מונחים על כתפו וסנם ותאבותה בידו חייב ומהמלובש בהם פטור. So he said one to carry out his clothes in the public domain while they are folded and placed on his shoulder and his sandal on his feet while the ring in his hand is liable, which means not on his finger. But if he's wearing them, so it's like some of the Hasidic sect you have in the Jerusalem Rabbarlach, they have many clothes one on the top of the other. So as long as you carry that wearing many, so he's exempt because he's not negated relative to him. המוציא אדם וחיליו עליו, וסנדליו ברגליו ותאבותיו בידו פטור, ולהוציאן כמות שאין חייב. One carries out a person with his garment on him, and his sandal on his feet, and his ring on his finger and his hand, which means all the clothes and jewelry, and he use it in a typical manner, so he's exempt. But if he carry them holding the cloth in his hand, he's liable because, just as the Rava said, he's liable because it's like he himself carried that item. Now we're going to practical halachot. Hakash al gabe amita. If there is a straw on a bed, which is presumably muktzeh, set aside because it might be used for kindling. They use it in those days to heat. It is prohibited to move it on Shabbat with one's hand. However, one may move it with straw with one's body in a shinu, in an atypical manner, if the straw is prepared for animal food, or if a place a pillow or a shirit before Shabbat, it is not muktzeh, it's not set aside, and one is allowed to shake it in his own hand. In those days, they used to have a machbesh kvisa, a laundry press. If one's garments were placed in a professional launderer's press, after they were washed, it is prohibited to remove it on Shabbat, even for Shabbat use. The press is tightly sealed, and loosening it is similar to disassembling a building. However, if the garment used is in a homeowner press, which is more loosely sealed, it's permissible to loosen the press and remove the clothing on Shabbat. Now it's important, halacha, it's called kiltul mehatzad. Object, that's Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 3:11. Objects that one is prohibited to move on Shabbat are prohibited only if they are moved in their typical manner. Moving this item in indirect manner is permitted. So let's say if you need to crush peppers, one is permitted to crush peppers on Shabbat. The Mishnah has said if they are to be eaten on Shabbat. Remember that you need to eat it right away on that Shabbat. And if they are crushed in an unusual manner, shinui, even if one crushes a large amount at one time. For instance, one may crush them with the handle of a knife and a ball as they opposed to utilizing a mortar or pestle. So also we learned the halacha of Yetziah min hanahar. one who bathes in a river on Shabbat must be dry off thoroughly when emerging from the water, so that the water will remain on his body and be carried 4 cubits in a carmelite. How about a mud? If you have teeth, one may has mud on his shoe, or his foot may wipe it off in the wall, but not on the ground, due to the concern that might level holes. Some authority, like the Rif, prohibit wiping the mud off on the wall and permit it only use on the beam. That's the Rif opinion. The Rosh hold that he permitted it use it on the ground, and you see also the Beit Yosef said that it's not a clear consensus on the issue. Most of the rabbis hold that only on a hole should be used, but the Bach is more stringent. Yeshiva בפתח המבוי, Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim 365. Although the law permits one to utilize and carry under a beam marking the entrance to an alleyway, the Mishnah said that a person should nonetheless not sit by the edge of the alleyway or by the side post, lest an object roll out of his hand and he come to retrieve it from the public domain. Another halacha we learn that the lo litzaded inish kuva. The Mishnah said it's prohibited to strain and tilt a pool barrel on the ground on Shabbat, since it is heavy. One may inevitably even use the hole in the ground. How about mortar on one's garment? If one has a mortar on his clothing, he may rub it off from the inside, since it does not have the appearance of laundering. But not rub it off from outside. It is also permitted to scrub it off in a fingernail. That is considered a shinui, an atypical. That's the opinion of Rav Huna. It's permitted to scrape dirt off both a new and old shoe on Shabbat with a knife or with a fingernail. Scraping is a tantamount to the labor of smoothing the leather. So, however, one may scrape the dirt off a shoe against a hole. It is prohibited to smear oil on one's foot on Shabbat while wearing a new shoe or a sandal, because it approximates tanning. However, it is permitted to smear oil on one's foot and put it on a shoe, or smear it oil on one's entire body in order to rest on leather carpet, as long as there is not enough oil to tan the leather and the intention is not to process the leather. We learn also halacha it is prohibited to go out on Shabbat wearing a shoe that is too large because its mile fell off and one may carry it. However, it's permitted to wear a large cloth because people not go out without clothing. We speak about women, that women may not wear a shoe on Shabbat that is torn at the top, because it might be marked, and carrying her to remove the shoe and to carry it, because it causes her to do it. And likewise, she is not going out wearing a new shoe because it does not fit her and might remove it. So again, we're talking about the place that they have no eruv, and we don't want her to carry it in the public domain when it's prohibited. Then we ask a question about the baby that or child that holding in his hand muktzeh. That's very practical. On Shabbat, if a child longs for his father to lift him, it's permitted for the father to lift the child even if he's holding a stone in his hand. One who carries a living baby with a purse hanging around his neck on Shabbat is an issue, because liable of carrying the purse in the purse is not secondary to the baby, so you have to take it out. And we explain clearly that when it's carrying the baby, one may have to make his effort that the baby will not carry muktzeh. But if the child insisted they want to hold this little stone in his hand, you're allowed to go ahead, and because your intent is not to carry the stone, the intent is to carry the child.
שוליים